everybody, and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the last video of October, but stay tuned till the end of the video where I will give you some updates on what's happening next with Harloween, because it's not technically over. So in a year where we have all asked ourselves, who would have predicted this? I think I have the answer. Nostradamus. Nostradamus would have seen this coming. Can anyone really predict the future? We may go to fortune tellers or shuffle the tarot deck looking for direction or turn to astrology for answers, but is it really possible for us to ever know what is coming? Do we even want to know what is coming? Many people over the course of history have believed to and claimed to have the sight, the ability to peer through space and time in order to predict future events. But one name stands out amongst them all as the most well-known soothsayer history has ever known. Nostradamus has had books written about him, documentaries made about him. He has been the discussion in homes all around the world, at simple wooden dinner tables, and in grand dining halls. I remember exactly where I was when I first heard about Nostradamus and his shockingly accurate prophecies. I was 9 years old, my parents were at work, and my father's sister was babysitting me. I call her Tita Nini. She's my godmother as well as my aunt, and she's quite the character. At this time, my grandmother was still alive, but she was very sick and my aunt was caring for her. But the first language of my father's family is not English, it's French. And they also speak and understand Spanish. So whenever I was at my aunt's house being babysat, there were no cartoons allowed, no Disney Channel, no Nickelodeon, because my grandmother didn't speak English. She would only watch the Spanish channels for her telenovelas, which are Spanish soap operas, or the History Channel because she liked the pictures of these faraway places. I think she was a little homesick, honestly. Anyways, this day that I'm speaking about, it was the History Channel, and it was a doomsday documentary about Nostradamus, and I felt myself completely pulled in and entranced by this man. Who he was, his life, what he did, and the things he claimed were to come. When I went home that night, Nostradamus went with me, and I could not shake that spooky feeling. It just stayed with me. And I remember talking to my mom about it that night, and she laughed at first, and she was like, oh, that's nothing, don't worry about it. But then she was pretty upset with my aunt later that night when I wouldn't sleep. Come to think of it, my Tita Nini actually exposed me to a lot of things at a young age. A lot of things that probably could have waited a couple of years. The Christmas after the whole Nostradamus thing, she gave me the movie Schindler's List for Christmas. I watched it at least 10 times that following month. So I probably really do have her to thank for my interest in history and these dark things. I should give her a call and thank her for that. Everyone, call your mom or your aunt or your grandmother. Tell her you love her. Tell her you're grateful to her. Life goes so fast, man. So fast. So the really interesting thing about Nostradamus, amongst everything else that's interesting about him, is how this simple Frenchman from the 1500s has become such an integral and enduring part of modern Western society. His book, The Prophecies, continues to sell, especially in times of unrest and uncertainty. The only thing I really can compare it to is the Bible. You know, a book that was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago by people who have long since passed, but it's still this book that people want to buy and want to read. And there's two groups of people that pore over his words. Those who believe he could in fact see the future, and those who attempt to debunk his prophecies. And this has pretty much been the case since Nostradamus lived and walked the earth. He had passionate followers and vehement detractors. Before we continue with the video, let's have a word from the sponsor of this video, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a modern VPN service designed with the user in mind. Their utilities are powered by robust security mechanisms, but they're also designed to be simple and intuitive to use, which is important for someone like me who does not learn new things easily especially when they're about like technology. I was using iMovie to edit these videos for a good portion of the life of this channel. And the reason I was using iMovie for so long, even though it kind of sucks and there's not a lot of things you can do with it, is because I was afraid of learning Final Cut because I know how long it takes me to learn things when they have to do with technology. So I can say for a fact, Surfshark is incredibly easy to use, which for me was one of the most important things because I don't have a lot of time to jump through a lot of hoops. With Surfshark, you can enjoy all the freedoms of an open internet safely and anonymously with no device limits. We've all been spending a lot more time at home lately, whether voluntarily or otherwise. And, here at least it's getting colder and the weather's not as nice. So we're just ending up being inside more. And I feel like we may be reaching the end of what we have available left to entertain us on television. You can use Surfshark VPN to access television shows, movies, and content that's not available in your area. I am a huge Peaky Blinders fan. I love Thomas Shelby. He's definitely one of my biggest television crushes after Damon from The Vampire Diaries. And when a new season comes out, I can't wait for it to hit Netflix. I need to watch it immediately. Like, I literally can't wait for it to hit Netflix. In general, there's a lot of BBC programming I enjoy that I don't have access to here in the States. I have in the past used sketchy VPN services to access these shows or college basketball games that were blacked out in my area. So it is really comforting to use Surfshark, a VPN that uses industry-leading encryption. And Surfshark will never track, monitor, or store what you do online. It's the one time you will be able to move freely, knowing no one is keeping track of your interests or usage on the internet for their own motives, like maybe to target you with marketing ads. During my research for these cases we cover, I also have an interest in using a VPN. Not only can I use camouflage mode, which allows me to keep all of my internet usage and history private from even my internet provider, but there's no borders mode, which allows me to search the web in restricted areas so I can dig really deep for all the dirt and all the details. If you are interested in joining me and having an open, safe, and private internet experience, click the link in the description box. Surfshark is giving viewers of this channel 85% off a 2-year plan and 3 extra months for free. All you have to do is click the link and use code stephanieharlowe to take advantage of this offer and start protecting yourself today on an unlimited number of devices. You can protect all your internet devices, including your phone, your computer, your tablet, as well as your family's devices, your husband's phone, your kid's tablet, your mom's computer, all of them unlimited devices, which is something that really makes Surfshark stand out from the rest of the VPN services out there. Keep your private information so safe, even Nostradamus wouldn't be able to crack it. All right, thank you guys so much for watching the sponsor and understanding that we do need sponsors in order to keep this channel going. And thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. They are a really great VPN service that I do use personally every single day, so I really appreciate them sponsoring this channel. Let's dive back into the video. Michel de Nostradamus, most well known as Nostradamus, was a French astrologer, physician, and seer. He was born in 1503, either on December 14th or December 21st, in the south of France, which is today known as Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, near Salon-de-Provence, where you can still find his original home, which now serves as a wax museum honoring his life. There's also a street, a boulevard, and a public square that bear his name. 2 statues of him, and local shops that sell everything from Nostradamus candy to Nostradamus wine. Nostradamus himself came from a well-off family with physicians and merchants on both his mother and father's side, and they were also very educated, with most of his male relatives being literate, and even some of the women were literate as well, which was not the norm for that time. His great-grandfather on his father's side was Jewish, and he had also been a grain merchant and moneylender from Avignon, but he converted to Christianity in 1453 to avoid persecution. His teenage son also converted, changing his name from Guy Gassenet to Pierre de Nostradamus, an overtly Christian name, to display his new faith. Pierre's first wife refused to convert, so he actually divorced her and married another woman whose name was Blanche de Santa Marie, also from a family of converts. They had had a son named Jaime, who worked as a scribe and merchant before leaving Avignon in the year 1500 and traveling to Saint Remy and marrying a woman named Rainier de Saint Remy, who had a lot to offer. Besides a very fancy-sounding name, she had a hefty dowry with a nice house that was surrounded by fields and orchards. Now, this couple would go on to have 9 children, 8 boys and 1 girl. The 5th son was Nostradamus himself. Even from a young age, it was very clear that this young man was intelligent. His maternal grandfather, who tutored him before he began traditional schooling, was the first to notice Nostradamus's intellect and introduced him to advanced languages like Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Nostradamus learned extensive mathematics long before others his own age were even exposed to such things. His grandfather was a strong influence in his young life, a figure who believed in him, encouraged him, and nurtured his potential and interests. One of these interests was astronomy. Even from a young age, the heavens held an allure for the young Nostradamus. At this time, people knew very little about what actually existed in the great expanse of sky. This was the Middle Ages, a time after the ancient astronomers and before Galileo and Copernicus. With the fall of Rome, much of the astronomy of the classical age was lost to Europeans. We don't call this time period the Dark Ages for nothing. There was a significant and notable deterioration of cultural, economical, and informational progress. We find very little art, music, or writing coming from this time, and many people's lives revolved around war, religious persecution, and the constant fear of plague. No one was really asking the important questions, like what's life all about? No one was looking into the sky and wondering what it all meant. They were too busy just trying to survive. But Nostradamus did have these questions, and he did look up at the stars, hoping to find the answers to life amongst their twinkling secrets. I tend to believe this is most likely due to his extensive early education, as well as due to the fact that he did grow up financially stable for the most part, so he might have had the luxury and privilege to reach for the stars, so to speak. At the age of 14, he enrolled in the University of Avignon, where he studied grammar, logic, music, and astronomy. After this, he studied medicine at Montpellier University, a school run by Catholic priests, and it appeared that Nostradamus often butted heads with these priests. He was enthralled by the stars and spent time studying astrology when he wasn't working on his doctorate, but the Catholic Church was at that time vehemently opposed to astrology and all other such practices which were considered pagan. All forms of divination are to be rejected, the Catechism of the Catholic Church stated. Recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead, or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future, consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretations of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums all conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as a wish to conciliate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear we owe to God alone. Now, it's worth noting that although the Catholic Church was not a huge fan of Nostradamus, he wasn't anti-religious. He actually did believe in God, and he was religious, as most people were in those times. So it was more of a case of him being religious, but also interested in other things, and the Catholic Church not being tolerant of anything outside the religious purview. Now, Montpellier was a prestigious university with a reputation for being very serious indeed, and Nostradamus simply did not enjoy his studies there, sitting in classrooms with dusty books and even dustier professors. He spent most of his time in the woods collecting plants, flowers, and herbs to turn into medicinal powders. He did not do this on the down low, however. He was pretty vocal and outspoken, and he told anyone who would listen that his natural and holistic approach to medicine was better than anything they were teaching at the school, so it was really no surprise when he was asked to leave. Nostradamus decided that instead of going back home, he would travel through the French countryside to teach himself things about nature and the world. He became educated on herbal medicine, worked as an apothecary, and increased his knowledge about the human body and how it could be healed with natural means. But a year later, the bubonic plague hit France again, and he had to put his studies on hold. And when I say hit France again, I mean that this plague had been an issue in Europe for over 100 years, and it kept rearing its ugly head. Between the years 1451 and 1550, there were 43 years of epidemics in the Provence area alone. This was Nostradamus' first encounter with the plague in person, and he was known to arrive in small, out-of-the-way towns and villages who didn't have their own physicians and offer help to the victims who had fallen ill. He actually did this for most of the 1520s before returning to Montpellier, where he continued to agitate priests. But in 1529, he obtained his medical degree anyways, most likely because they just wanted to get rid of him. Undoubtedly, though, his issues with the Catholic Church were just beginning. It was during this time that Michel de Nostradamus became Nostradamus after he Latinized his name. And the practice of Latinizing one's name was not uncommon at the time, and it was often done to emulate popular Latin authors or to present a more impressive image. After graduation, he traveled around France, dedicating himself to providing medical care to bubonic plague victims. When the plague would strike, it hit hundreds of thousands, and there was no known cure. Today, we know that it was caused by a bacteria and that antibiotics are needed to get better. But in those days, they had no idea where it was coming from or how to help those who had contracted it. Some of the cures they tried, though, included rubbing onions, herbs, or a snake on the boils, cutting up a pigeon and rubbing it over an infected body, drinking vinegar, eating crushed minerals, arsenic, or mercury, which all sound super healthy to do. Sitting close to a fire or sewer was also known to drive out the fever. Sitting close to a fire or a sewer. Either one, take your pick. It doesn't matter, they're very similar. Pretty much, doctors thought that the plague was being spread through the air, which is why they wore masks and tried to purify the air with dried flowers, herbs, and spices. It was actually said that Nostradamus had a higher success rate in saving plague victims than other trained physicians using these methods, and he had a bit of a different approach to battling the illness. Long before the connection between cleanliness and sickness was made, Nostradamus stressed the importance of proper hygiene. Using rose hips, which is the fruit of the rose plant and something that I have to say personally is a staple in my own skincare routine. It's awesome. Nostradamus created, with the rose hips, the precursor to a vitamin C supplement. This was a trick he'd picked up while traveling through the French countryside and learning about different plants in the region that had medicinal purposes. Rose hips are extremely high in vitamin C, and those who were in the early stages of the disease did seem to be helped by it, most likely due to a boost of their immune system. Now, it was pretty common in those days for physicians to spend some time traveling about before settling down in the city of their birth to start a practice. The Greek physician Hippocrates, who's known for his oath to do no harm, the Hippocratic Oath, also traveled around offering his services to people who did not have access to medical care or who could not afford it, and it was pretty standard for young physicians to follow in his footsteps after completing medical school. This would help not just the people in need, but the doctor himself, who would gain invaluable hands-on experience. He would also encounter different illnesses, and it would also give these doctors access to other physicians with more experience and knowledge. They would make professional connections. Now, most of these young doctors did not remain travelers for more than a year or two, since this was a very hard life. Most of the country was undeveloped, covered in forests, swamps, fields, and plains as far as the eye could see, inhabited by all sorts of wild beasts looking for their next hot meal. When a traveler did get lucky enough to find a road, they were often poorly maintained, and a quick night's rain would turn them into sticky mud traps. But Nostradamus seemed to have thrived in this environment, and he remained a traveling doctor for more than a decade, traveling all over France and even into northern Italy, once again treating those who had fallen victim to the bubonic plague. To be fair, it wasn't as if Nostradamus had discovered the cure or even that he was very much more advanced in his knowledge of it than his peers. He felt this disease had been sent to the earth due to a combination of divine punishment for humanity's sins and wickedness, as well as planetary alignment, which allowed the pestilent air to enter the human body. He told healthy people that if they wanted to avoid becoming ill, they should be of good moral fiber, eat a healthy diet, exercise, and get a good night's sleep. They should also use one of his powders containing rosehip cloves and other plants to cover their mouths so that the poisoned air could not enter into their bodies. What was most striking about this young doctor, however, was his lack of fear around his sick patients. The plague had been around long enough for everyone to know how quickly and easily it spread and how ruthless it was once it hit. Many people that he helped felt that Nostradamus had risked his own life for them, and in the end, his striking acts of human kindness made these people feel less alone and more hopeful, which also may have improved their condition because, as we know, mind over matter, sometimes a good mental outlook can help your health. The news of his success in helping those struck down by the plague spread, and he gained notoriety as a plague doctor. The locals used his services and allowed him to make a living, but it wasn't long before he also caught the attention of some more notable figures, one of which was Jules César Scaliger, a leading scholar based out of Agen in southwest France. So Nostradamus goes to southwest France, he begins living there, and here he continued to build his reputation. He got married, he had 2 children, he lived a comfortable, happy life while being mentored and financed by Scaliger. However, when his wife and children all died of the plague while he was on a medical trip to Italy and he was unable to save them because he wasn't there, rumors began to circulate that maybe he wasn't all that he was cracked up to be. Scaliger also lost faith in his abilities, and Nostradamus began to lose his status in the community. Between the grief of having his entire family die and losing his reputation, Nostradamus once again became a wanderer, and he sort of dropped off the map for several years. He resurfaced in 1538 in Provence, once again locking horns with the Catholic Church. He had made some offhanded remark about a religious statue, which many did not perceive to be so offhanded or casual. So the church was like, you need to come and talk to us about this comment you made, this casual offhand comment that you made. You need to come and talk to us about it. So you need to appear in front of us in a sort of inquisition format. And Nostradamus kind of realized there was really no good outcome to him if he appeared before the church inquisition. Most likely he was going to be imprisoned. So he basically ran. He went on the road again and planned to not return to the area until he felt the smoke had cleared and people had forgotten about his misstep. It's believed that after leaving France, Nostradamus traveled to the ancient lands of Greece and Turkey, and it was during his time in Greece that he became more interested and adept at astrology. Astrology was created by the Babylonians, and from there, the ancient Egyptians fine-tuned it, and the Greeks adapted it and turned it into what we know today. Greece is truly where astrology became popular. Even the word itself comes from the Greek word for star. The zodiac was created by the Greeks, and it means the circle of animals. Now, it's said that during this period of travel, Nostradamus began dabbling in the occult, horoscopes, divine meditation, necromancy, and magical objects such as the hawthorn rod. Now, the hawthorn tree is considered by many to be magical, associated with fertility and the fairy realm. A rod created from the wood of this tree was thought to be a blessing rod used for white magic, and it would be able to be used to bring about positive and good fortune. However, it seemed as if his ability to tell the future had preceded his journeys to Greece. While he was in Italy, Nostradamus had spent some time with a group of Franciscan monks, and while there, he allegedly predicted that one of them would become pope during their lifetime. And in 1585, one of them did. Felice Peretti became Pope Sixtus V. In 1547, after being away for almost 10 years, Nostradamus returned to France, feeling that his notoriety had died down. He continued his medical practice there, but behind the scenes, he spent time working on his other talents. He ended up settling in Salon-de-Provence, where he married again, this time to a widow, a woman named Anne Ponsard Jumel. And Anne was a very sweet woman. She had been widowed at a young age, and she had a nice little nest egg from her deceased husband. Together, Nostradamus and Anne would have 6 children between the years 1551 and 1561, 3 boys and 3 girls. For a while, Nostradamus continued his rigorous travels, but within a few years, he began spending more time at home, either because he was now in his 50s or because he wanted to spend more time with his family, maybe still feeling the sting from the loss of his first wife and 2 children. He continued helping plague victims, and he wrote 2 medical books, one of which was focused on proper nutrition to combat the plague. He set up a little practice from his home, treating not only the sick but the healthy as well to make sure that they would stay healthy. He had different medical rituals for every season. In the spring, he recommended that his patients purge their bodies either by opening a vein or vomiting. Once again, those are very similar things, just like the sewer and the fire. Pick your poison, fire or sewer, vein or vomit. In the winter, Nostradamus suggested that people avoid being sedentary. They should also eat meat and avoid bathing. Oh God, can you imagine somebody in the winter who is not being sedentary, which means they're moving around quite a bit. Maybe they're sweating a little bit. They're also eating a ton of meat, and they're not bathing. I wonder how they smelled. He was also well known for his concoctions made from whatever he found in the woods and fields. He had pastes for teeth to clean and whiten them. He had pastes that were an early form of hair dye. He also had a love potion that was alleged to have been so powerful that just a few drops placed in a woman's mouth would trigger a burning passion for the holder of the mixture. It sounds kind of like a roofie to me, but okay, Nostradamus, I see you. But within no time, his interests steered back towards the occult practices he had picked up during his travels. He would sit for hours in meditation, placing a bowl of water and herbs at his feet. It was during these bouts of deep meditation that he began to first have his visions, which led to his following prophecies. Now, at this time, almanacs were very popular. You know, the most popular almanac I can think of is the Farmer's Almanac. So Nostradamus created his own almanacs of his prophecies and his interpretation of them. By the year 1550, Nostradamus was calling himself an astrophile, claiming there was nothing more beautiful than scrutinizing the heavens for secrets of the cosmos and the shape of things to come. His first almanac was written in 1550 and contained predictions for the year to come. Now he gained a different kind of following, people who were coming to him not only for medical advice, but also for metaphysical guidance. His customers would visit him at home and request the name of the person who had stolen from them, or they would ask, which local girl should my son marry in order to provide him with the best and most healthy children. Others were concerned with larger issues, such as the fate of a war-torn France and its political figures. Now, although we have no way to know if he was correct in his predictions, we can only assume that he got it right more than he got it wrong, because people read these and considered them legitimate enough to apply to their everyday lives and to cause high-profile figures to travel from their country of origin to seek his guidance, such as an Italian dignitary who was interested in finding out about any future plots aimed at the Duke of Florence. After the first almanac was popular and successful, he wrote another one the next year, and for 9 years after that. By 1554, his visions were becoming more and more important and real to him. He created 10 volumes, each containing 100 prophecies that would predict events for the next 20,000 years, ending in the year 3797. He called these centuries. In 1555, he published a collection of these long-term prophecies, and he called the book Les Prophéties, or The Prophecies, because he was still afraid of catching the attention of the Catholic Church, since future telling was considered to be an occult practice. He found a way to almost code these prophecies using quatrains. Now, a quatrain is a poem with 4 lines. He kind of claimed that this is why his prophecies seemed so vague and open to interpretation. The belief is he cannot directly write predictions for the future because of the way fortune telling was looked upon at this time. Now, out of the over 1,200 quatrains that he produced, only 946 have been recovered today, and they are published now in many different languages. So how did Nostradamus receive his visions? Was he just like sitting there in the bath, as long as it wasn't winter, because you're not supposed to bathe in the winter? Was he just sitting in the bath and then it just occurred to him, or was he having dinner and it just popped into his head? How did it work? Well, his first quatrain gives us a little bit of a behind the scenes peek. It says, "Sitting alone at night in secret study. It is placed on the brass tripod. A slight flame comes out of the emptiness and makes successful that which should not be believed in vain." Being alone at night would remove distractions of family or work and allow Nostradamus to focus on his vision. And he said there was a tripod of brass, and people believe that he's referring to the stool of brass, which has historical connotations that go all the way back to ancient Greece. Individuals who would visit the Oracle of Delphi, one of the most important shrines in all of Greece, would always sit on a stool made of brass. The shrine of Delphi was built on what was considered to be at that time the center of the world, and people would come from all over to have their questions answered by the priestess of Apollo. Now, according to what we can interpret from this quatrain, it seems like he would light a fire in the fireplace, and I guess the visions would sort of leap out of the flames. As word of his prophecies spread, Nostradamus received mixed reviews. There was some who believed him to be a servant of Satan. Others claimed he was a fake, a false prophet. Still, others believed him to be mentally unstable. All these people agreed on one thing, though. He should not be trusted, and what he was doing went against everything that the church told them was right and good. For the most part, though, Nostradamus was like a rock star, like a Middle Ages rock star, especially in the upper classes. He became very in demand with the elites in France, and through these people, his fame spread to the royal court of France. One of his greatest admirers was Catherine de' Medici. Catherine was the Queen of France and has been called the most powerful woman in 16th century Europe. If you're interested in history, you should read a little bit about the Medicis, about Catherine specifically. She was a total badass, just a very important and really cool figure in history. But after the death of her husband and the King of France, Henri II, Catherine and her son, Charles IX, went on a tour of France. Now, Charles had just come of age. The strength of the kingdom and the crown were questioned, and the rebellions were popping up all across the land. A civil war was looming, and the French crown could not really have this threat to public order and unity hanging over them. In order to show the people that this new king, this young king, was capable and caring, Catherine and Charles, and pretty much like the entire French court, embarked on this 2-year tour so that the new king could survey his kingdom and be seen by its people to restore faith in his ability to rule in place of his deceased father. Now, when this royal party arrived in Provence, Catherine chose an old castle to stay the night in, and she promptly requested an audience with Nostradamus, whose reputation had spread far and wide, and who at that time was in his 60s. But this is not the first time she met Nostradamus. It's not the first time they talked, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, Catherine de' Medici was a very multifaceted woman. She was interested in art, astronomy, and astrology, and she'd read Nostradamus's almanacs where it was suggested that harm could come to her family, and she clearly believed there was some merit to it. And he had also personally made a previous prediction to her that ended up coming true. So she summoned him to her borrowed castle. When Nostradamus arrived, Catherine asked him, "What is going to be the fate of my 3 sons, Charles, Henri III, and Hercules?" Charles, Henri III, and Hercules. What is their fates going to be? And Nostradamus assured her that peace would soon be restored to her kingdom, and the young King Charles would live to the age of 90. And when I say her kingdom, I mean her kingdom, because Charles was so young, he didn't really know what he was doing. Catherine was the one running France for a good part of his reign, in my opinion. Now, feeling sufficiently comforted, Catherine gave Nostradamus 300 crowns, and, she said she would see him soon, and they would get together again soon. Maybe they'd get some Nostradamus wine. Just kidding. Nostradamus was also not the first astrologer that Catherine had consulted, and he wouldn't be the last. She would go on to host many of Europe's esteemed stargazers at the top of her Colonne de l'Horoscope, a 31-meter column decorated with fleur-de-lis and Catherine's monogrammed initials. Her personal astrologer, yes, she had her own personal astrologer, and his name was Cosimo Ruggieri. He had told her in 1571 that he saw her living near Saint Germain. So Catherine basically just left the Tuileries Palace and purchased the Hotel d'Albret, along with its surrounding lands and structures. And then this huge column was erected 3 years later, and it was actually used to be closer to the heavens in order to read the stars. And I kind of told you this little story because I wanted to show you how seriously people took this kind of stuff back then. Sometimes, reading the stars and listening to horoscopes and stuff like that is considered to be a new age kind of thing, but it really wasn't. Back in the day, people took this very seriously. She moved. She left her palace and got a new residence specifically because of what her personal astrologer told her. They took it very seriously. So before seeing Nostradamus in his hometown during this French tour, Catherine had invited him to court in the year 1555, requesting that he provide horoscopes for her children and her husband, the King of France, Henri II. But Nostradamus had had an unsettling vision about the king regarding a possible eye injury. Nostradamus told Catherine that Henri should avoid jousting, a sport played on horses using long lances to knock your opponent off his steed, and Nostradamus pointed to one of his quatrains as proof. And the quatrain read, "The young lion will overcome the older one. On the field of combat in a single battle, he will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made 1, then he dies a cruel death." Now, Catherine passed this information on to Henri, but the King of France did not seem to share his wife's belief in prophecies, and besides, if there was one thing Henri loved, it was jousting and also hunting. He loved jousting and hunting. So Catherine became vigilant in trying to keep her husband away from jousting, away from any, sharp wooden lances, away from horses. But I imagine it was a full-time job because, like I said, Henri loved to joust. But 3 years later, in June of 1559, France and Spain sealed a really major peace treaty. It was years in the making, and it would be marked by 2 weddings between the royal families, one of which I believe involved Henri's own daughter. So a grand jousting tournament was planned as part of the celebrations, and Henri, in all his manliness, announced that he was going to be battling all of the challengers to prove how brave and virtuous he was, therefore proving how brave and virtuous France was. Now, the night before the tournament, his wife, the Queen, Catherine, had a dream that her husband would be injured, and she begged him not to compete, but he still showed up, dressed in elegant black and white, wearing a beautiful golden helmet, and he climbed atop his noble steed named Unfortunate. That was actually the name of the horse, Unfortunate. Henri was legitimately laughing in the face of fate. So he took out his first 2 opponents before squaring off against Gabriel de Lorge, Count of Montgomery and 6 years younger than the king, making him the younger lion, right? The 2 men and their horses collided during the joust, and the splinter of Gabriel's shattered wooden lance slipped through the visor of Henri's helmet, piercing his right eye. Another shard of the lance also pierced Henri's throat. 10 days later, the King of France was dead. Catherine remembered the prophecy of Nostradamus. The young lion will overcome the older one. The count was younger than the king. On the field of combat in a single battle, he will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. The king was wearing a helmet made of gold, and the visor of the helmet was slatted, sort of resembling bars of a cage. 2 wounds make 1, then he dies a cruel death. Henri was wounded in his eye and throat, and due to these wounds, his life ended. Nostradamus worked on these prophecies until his death on July 2nd, 1566. So let's talk quickly about some other well-known prophecies of Nostradamus and what they're widely believed to represent as the years have passed. So Quatrain 51 states, "The blood of the just will commit a fault at London. Burnt through lightning of 23's the 6. The ancient lady will fall from her high place. several of the same sect will be killed. Many believe this quatrain refers to the Great Fire which devastated the city of London in 1666, 100 years after Nostradamus' death. 20 times 3 is 60, plus 6 makes 66, the year the fire happened. It started just after midnight on September 2nd. A spark from a local bakery started the blaze, which then rushed rapidly through the city, encouraged by strong eastern winds and dry conditions. When the fire reached the warehouses packed with oil and other flammable materials on the river, things only got worse, and London burned for several days, destroying the city. Now, the ancient lady in the prophecy could have referred to any one of the statues or monuments that fell in the midst of the blaze, and afterwards there was a good deal of finger-pointing and allegations of who had started the fire, with battle lines being drawn based on religious affiliations, resulting in attacks and lynchings. However, there were only 6 confirmed deaths, and in fact, some historians believe the fire actually helped save lives. The year prior, the plague had rushed through London, killing 80,000 people just in that city alone. Now, the London fire is believed to have destroyed not just the city, but the plague in the city as well, burning down unsanitary buildings with its disease-infested rats and lice. And after this, the plague did not return, at least to London. Now, a man who confessed to having started the fire claimed to have been an agent of the Pope, and he was tried, found guilty, and hanged as a result, leading some to believe that in the prophecy this man represented the blood of the just line. However, after his hanging, it was discovered that he was at sea when the fire started, and he didn't arrive in London until 2 days after the fire started, so who really knows why he confessed to that? Another quatrain reads, "From the enslaved populace, songs, chants, and demands, while princes and lords are held captive in prisons, these will in the future, by headless idiots, be received as divine prayers." Now, it is widely believed that this quatrain refers to the French Revolution, which saw the overthrow of the monarchy and the rise of a new republic. The enslaved populace would refer to the Third Estate, who took control of Paris and gave their demands to the palace, or gave their demands to the princes and lords, specifically the King of France, Louis, and his wife, Marie Antoinette. There were lots of reasons for this revolution, and this is one of my favorite historical subjects, so I wish we had more time to go into it, but essentially, France had gone into debt after a war with England, as well as helping with the American Revolution. The population in France had also nearly doubled over, the past several years, and there just wasn't enough to go around. People were going hungry. So while most of the country starved, they watched the king and his wife live in extravagance. Now, it is a myth that when Marie Antoinette was asked, what do the people do? They have no bread. She said, let them eat cake. She never said this. She wasn't really a cruel person. She was just born in wealth and status, and she didn't have a great understanding of what was going on in her country. But she still paid the price for her ignorance and privilege when she was publicly beheaded after Versailles was stormed by a hungry and angry mob. All across France, thousands of royalists, nobles, and those loyal to the royal family were also sent to the guillotine, leading to the line, while princes and lords are held captive in prison, there will, in the future, be headless idiots. Now, this one does seem to eerily predict what actually happened in the French Revolution, and I will explain why I think Nostradamus was able to so accurately predict this happening in a moment. But first, we're going to talk about one more quatrain. And this one reads, "Near the gates and within 2 cities, there will be 2 scourges, the like of which has never been seen. Famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief." It is said that this quatrain predicted the 1945 atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 2 cities and 2 scourges, the likes of which has never been seen, which isn't referring to the 2 cities, but in fact the 2 bombs that were dropped on these cities. Now, when this happened, the atomic bomb was something new, something that was never before used on actual people, something that had never before really been seen. Many times, supporters of Nostradamus argue that he isn't more specific about these visions because when he was having the visions, he didn't know how to describe what he saw because In his time, it wouldn't make much sense. He might describe a plane as a shining bird or a skyscraper as a metal tower. The aftermath of these attacks in Japan were horrible. Many suffered from exposure to radiation that lasted for generations, and there were horrendous food shortages as a result, what you might call a famine without a plague. Most of these people were civilians. They would have no idea what was happening to them or why, and they probably did cry out for answers, for relief from God or anyone who would listen. Now, I know that there's going to be comments because it's YouTube and the internet brings out the worst in people, brings out the best in some people and the worst in others. And there's going to be people in the comments who say, well, they deserved it because Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and that was horrible too. And I agree. What happened in Pearl Harbor was horrible. That's not what we're talking about today, though. I think that as humans, we can all agree that what happened in Pearl Harbor and what happened in Japan with the atomic bombs are equally horrible. And nobody that was involved in either of these attacks deserved what happened to them. So we don't need to argue about who was more wrong, who was more right, who was justified in doing what they did. It's just a sad situation on both ends. So let's just try to be human about the whole situation. And so it is believed that Nostradamus predicted the rise of Hitler, Napoleon's domination over Europe, the reign of King Philip of Spain, the attacks on the World Trade Center in September of 2011, Louis Pasteur's discovery of penicillin, the assassination of JFK, and the list keeps going. For me personally, I don't believe he saw the future, even though that would be the coolest thing ever. 9-year-old me sitting in front of that History Channel documentary thought it would be the coolest thing ever. 36-year-old me still thinks it would be the coolest thing ever. But also, I just don't believe it. That's not to say I don't believe he predicted the future. I just don't think he saw it. Much like today's world, where experts examine current trends and past polls and races to predict the outcome of a presidential election, I think Nostradamus had the clear insight that history repeats itself. There will always be war. There will always be death and pain and revolts. There will always be natural disasters. There will always be horrible stuff happening. If you go through his quatrains, there really aren't any happy positive ones, none. And they're all written in a way that's really spooky, really scary, but they're also super general, like fortune cookies. You could pick any one at random, and if you know enough about history or you have internet access, you could attribute them to one or more world events in the past, or even happening currently, if you're willing to stretch far enough and kind of have a loose interpretation. However, I also don't think that this man was a scam artist trying to trick people into thinking he was a prophet. He truly believed he was having these visions and that his ability to see these things was gifted to him by God. He once wrote in a letter to his son, quote, "We human beings cannot, through our natural consciousness and intelligence, know anything of God the Creator's hidden secrets, for it is not for us to know the times or the instants." He also tells his son, quote, "But my son, lest I venture too far for your future perception, be aware that men of letters shall make grand and usually boastful claims about the way I interpreted the world. Before the worldwide conflagration, which is to bring so many catastrophes and such revolution that scarcely any lands will not be covered by water, and this will last until all has perished save history and geography themselves. This is why, before and after these revolutions in various countries, the rains will be so diminished, and such abundance of fire and fiery missiles shall fall from the heavens that nothing shall escape the Holocaust. Far before war ends the century, and in its final stages, it will hold the century under its sway. Some countries will be in the grip of revolution for several years, and others ruined for a still longer period." End quote. It's as if he was telling his son, there will be people who try and claim they knew what I was saying in these prophecies, but no one really knows what the plan is. Only when it finally happens, when we are in the midst of it with no time left to change things, to save ourselves, will we finally see the complete picture. And as depressing as that sounds, I would like to leave you with, a little bit of a silver lining. Nostradamus was sure the world would end one day. End after wars and revolutions and fire raining from the sky, but he made predictions until the year 3797, so, it appears we still have quite a bit of time. We should be all right. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. It was a very fun topic to research and to talk about with you guys, and I want to give you a quick update on what's happening with Harloween because of the way that things went with my Gmail, how I kind of didn't have access to my notes for a good almost 3 weeks. I did fall behind, and although October is coming to a close, there are still a couple Halloween videos I want to share with you this year, one of them being H.H. Holmes, which is a very important video. I was supposed to do it last year, but I wanted to do more research. Now it's kind of finally ready. I'm just polishing it up, and I do want to share it with you guys now. So I will probably be bringing you H.H. Holmes in November, and we'll just have a little bit of an extended Halloween. And there's also a couple other videos I wanted to do for Halloween in November, but I will be bringing back Coffee and Crime Times in November, so it'll kind of be like a hybrid month, like half Halloween and half just normal content. And that way everybody's happy, because I know some people don't like the Halloween videos. They're more into like the hardcore true crime videos, but I do have to say that Halloween did give me a nice break from the hardcore true crime videos, which I think mentally we all need sometimes. So that was very cool, but there will be more to come. There will be something for everybody, so stay tuned. Thank you so much to all of you who shared this Halloween with me. Thank you so much to all of you who are willing to share Halloween with me continuing into November. I really appreciate you guys coming back and watching these videos, giving me feedback, letting me know, talking to me in the comments. My phone just vibrated super loud. Make sure to like this video if you liked it. Make sure to share it if you think it's worth sharing. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already, because I would love to see you here more. Make sure that if you already did subscribe and you're no longer subscribed, to resubscribe, because YouTube, well, you know how they are. They're crazy. They love to unsubscribe people from my channel and not notify you guys when I post a video, but we're going to get through it together. All of us, even YouTube, they're forced to get through this with us. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Links are in the description box. The Halloween merch link is also in the description box. And remember, stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay spooky. And I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood.